Hey, so I'm Joe Brady. I'm here with,
Adrian Melvin.
and we are in the barrel room at Olde Raleigh Distillery in downtown Zebulon, North Carolina. So why Zebulon, North Carolina? We'll talk a little bit more about that later, because I mean, Cullen Bagpipes is just right next door, and why you're here at Olde Raleigh with me in the barrel room back here. And a little noisy back here, things going on. There's actually a tour going on right now. I remember this time last year, Bob Worrell was here, and he walked in and his eyes just lit up and he took a big whiff and he's like, oh, the angel share. You could smell it in the air in here. So I have some bourbon in my hand. Adrian has some bourbon and some bagpipes. This is a honey barrel, and this is the very first episode of bourbon with bagpipes. Or is it bagpipes with bourbon?
I think bourbon with bagpipes.
Fair enough. Bourbon with bagpipes. So the bourbon came first.
Absolutely.
So this is our inaugural video podcast, and we want to talk a little bit about your journey of how you got to Zebulon, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
My journey to North Carolina is a completely different story that started 20 years ago, and maybe that'll be in episode 17. We'll talk about that. So, but just for now, Adrian Melvin, welcome to Olde Raleigh Distillery, to the barrel room. Welcome to North Carolina.
Yep.
From Scotland to Australia to Chicago to North Carolina. So I just got to ask, this whole bagpipe thing, how did it get started for you? I don't want to call it a hobby. I know it's not a hobby.
No, I get
Just
it.
like, drinking bourbon is not a hobby. It becomes a profession.
Yeah. So years ago, I was a young kid, Dundee, Scotland. I played a couple of different instruments. I played piano mainly as a young kid. Did really well. Didn't practice, just like lots of other kids. Had a lot of potential. And then I went to my grandma's birthday up in Huntly in Aberdeenshire. And a bagpiper came in, played Happy Birthday and some other tunes. And I said to my dad afterwards, I said, I got to do that.
Very Scottish tune, Happy Birthday.
Oh, yeah. And some other things. But I said, I got to do that. And then driving home, my dad said, we were driving from Aberdeen area back down to Dundee. And my dad said, well, I used to play. And I'm like, what? And he said he'd stopped for 18 years because of career.
So you never saw your dad play?
No. So I'm 12, 13 at this time. And he said, no, I haven't played for 18 years. My bagpipes are underneath the bed. He hadn't played. So my dad said, okay, I'll get a practice chanter for you. I'll teach you the tunes. I'll get back up and running again too. And we'll kind of play together and all that kind of stuff. And we'll kind of learn and get you going. So I started lessons with my dad, Kenneth Melvin, who had been a previous pipe major of the Robert Gordon's College pipe band up in Aberdeen.
That band's still around today, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a school band and that kind of stuff. And so he did that. So he got me started. I did maybe 2-3 months with my dad. And then like a typical kid, I couldn't take lessons from my dad. Typical hothead. So eventually I went to the Boys Brigade, the 16th Boys Brigade under Dave Marr in Dundee. Really enjoyed it, had a great time, loads of that kind of stuff. Then eventually, super lucky, a certain person came to teach in the Harris Academy, which was my secondary school in Dundee, whose name was Ian Duncan. And Ian Duncan was teaching full-time the kids in Dundee around the schools, and he was also the pipe major of the ScotRail Vale of Atholl at the time. So Ian taught me at school once a week and turned my life completely around. So all of a sudden I kind of became far more serious and kind of delved in deep. And most nights my dad would be telling me to put the pipes away at 10 o'clock at night.
So it was kind of at that point you figured that this was your thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I wasn't listening to like any other kind of music. All of a sudden I was like, okay, rock music and all the rest doesn't matter anymore. I was in the bagpiping from then for a while. So yeah, absolutely.
So coming up in those early years, those learning and developing years, who were some of your mentors and influences?
Well, obviously Ian Duncan,
yeah,
because of the music at the time, and Gordon Duncan. And I was super lucky that eventually Ian let me join the Vale of Atholl. Initially.
And how old were you when you joined the Vale?
17, 18.
Okay.
But before that, between the Boys Brigade band and the Vale, I ended up playing with the Mackenzie Caledonian band, which was a top grade 2 band at the time in Dundee. And I ended up playing with my dad in that band, and my dad ended up being the president of the band.
So your
and all
dad
this kind of
started
stuff.
playing again too after you?
Right.
Huh.
So we both played in grade 2 in the same band. That was fantastic. And then I kept on going, kept on working, and just like fixated on getting better. And I ended up joining the Vale of Athol under Ian. And then I remember meeting Gordon Duncan and him being in the band. And it was just like fantastic music. And just all of a sudden, my whole world exploded, you know?
In all the best ways.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So in all the best ways, things exploded, but did you come across any challenges?
Yes. So, so like any typical young kid learning the bagpipes, you can get right into it and really enjoy it and start playing really fast and, you know, playing all the cool tunes and all that kind of stuff. But I do remember, maybe it was about 10 years ago, a good friend of mine, Malcolm Robertson, we were chatting actually in Glasgow, the week of the Worlds one year. And he was the pipe sergeant of the Vale of Athol, the Scotland Vale of Athol back then. And recently he told me, he says, I remember you joined the band. He said, I didn't think you'd last very long because you had crossing noises everywhere. And he said, but they kind of disappeared within a month. And that was a kind of hard experience for me. It was like, Ian let me join the band, but very quickly he was like, this has to go, this has to get fixed, this has to get fixed, you have to do this. You have to. So he did, and I was like, fixated. I was like, okay, show me how to do it. I'll get rid of it. And I did. So that was a kind of the big mountain for me to climb at the time, was to clean up all my embellishments, all my playing, learn how to play on the beat, you know, how to blow the proper tone on the bagpipe and everything very quickly.
So how would you say, and please, you might want to try some bourbon.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite tasty. This is the honey barrel batch we're not promoting, but you know.
I know, but I like Olde Raleigh. It's a good place.
So thank you to Brandon for letting us come back here and do our thing. Just your musical journey over the years, and it has evolved. I mean, you've been around the world playing the bagpipes. Are there specific moments or milestones that stand out for you? I know one of them for sure. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I would say one thing. I've been very lucky to move around the world and be in different places in the world. And I am super thankful for that. I will say one thing, I got a lot of flack from people because I moved around in different places. But that was just
and you have a lot of kilts, right?
Right, exactly. But that's just the way my life evolved. And the way I look at it is I kind of helped a lot of bands in that process and a lot of people, and kind of, I think, helped in my own little way. But I mean, I would say, so I moved to Australia when I was 21, joined the Victoria Police under Pipe Major Nat Russell, and I flew out on the plane at the time with Paul Turner, who was a good friend of mine, who was the ex-lead drummer of the Vale of Athol. And I have to say that was a fantastic experience, because that band was just like, so, sorry, backtrack a second. I went out to, I was in charge of a quintet that went eventually to Jakarta, Indonesia, and we played a competition in there. And the Victoria Police came up and played that competition. And I remember seeing the new bags, the new plastic drone reeds, everything, all that kind of stuff. And I remember meeting Robert Crozier and I think Brian Niven and some of the rest of the guys at the time. And I was like, that's going somewhere. You know, I could just see it from a mile off. And that was the first time I met them. But I remember, so I moved out to Australia, and I knew it was just going to be a pivotal thing in my career, was going out to Australia. And this band was phenomenal. And to be honest, we didn't have gold medalists throughout the pipe corps, but the whole band played as a unit. You know, it was very much like the old Strathclyde Police. And that's who we were, in some way, trying to be a new version of the Strathclyde Police, but with a little bit more, I don't know, new style music. You know, so mixing the two kind of thing, you know. But that was a massive experience for me, was to be so immersed in my piping, doing it daily, but then also doing it very intensely competitive at a high level. And obviously, in the end, the fantastic thing for me was obviously winning the Worlds with the band. I mean, it was a shame that the band didn't continue after that because it was just getting into its stride. But that was fantastic. And I would say bagpiping has been phenomenal to me, and that it's taken me around the world. It's opened the doors for me in so many different opportunities. I mean, I got to play in the 78 Fraser Highlanders with Bill Livingston. And Bill is a phenomenal character, and that his music is just inspirational. He's very different in how he leads a band. But I was very lucky in that I've played in all these different bands. I've seen the good and the bad of how they operate. And I think I've learned a lot that I can glean to other people. So I would say my experiences have really kind of helped me become a better tutor or somebody to give advice to bands, etc.
Yeah, I just think back to the Victoria Police of how much of an inspiration they were for a generation of pipers. You know, hearing Master Blaster
Right.
for the first time and
Yeah.
wanting to play all those tunes.
Well, I remember the first competition. So I went down to Australia in July. Me and Paul went down, I think, the first week of July. No, we arrived on the 12th of July. And Northern Irish people will know why. Anyway, why that's pivotal. Anyway, we travelled back for the Worlds that year. And I remember it was like heavy, heavy, heavy rain that whole day. But I think that was the first main year that we were playing these synthetic bags. So we played that day, and our drone sound was just like bang on. It was just like not.
So was that the Ross bags with the clamps on the back?
Right, with the plastic drone. So we
Yeah.
had no problem getting a drone sound. Everybody else was sodden wet, and like half the drones going off and going out of tune. So I do remember that as being like a really pivotal day. It was like, this is crazy. We've got such a good sound in bad conditions. So yeah, I think that was a pivotal day for the pipe band world too.
So just pivoting the conversation just a bit.
Yeah.
Reed making.
Yeah.
So what in the world inspired you to say, you know what, I want to make reeds?
So I remember years ago with the Victoria Police, actually, I ended up driving Nat, because obviously I know Scotland and driving and all that kind of stuff. I drove him to shots. And I think Brian Niven was with the Pipe Sergeant too. I think there was three of us or whatever. We drove to shots and we went to McAllister's to pick reeds and all that kind of stuff and say hi to Mr. McAllister and all that kind of stuff. And I remember it was in a wee small town of Shots, and I think it was like, it was crazy. I don't quite remember this quite right, but it was like the doorway was in between two levels of the stairs. So I don't know if it was a big coal room or whatever, but it was a small little kind of room that they had their kind of reed making in there. And I remember being in there and seeing McAllister just chatting away, and he's like kind of chiseling away, not even looking. And I still getting done because it was so automatic. I remember watching him kind of spellbound, kind of thinking, that's amazing he can make these.
And
reeds.
he made them out of 2x4s, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. So they're like, that was the old kind of strong reeds, the old days. And I remember just being fascinated ever since then. And then I was very, very lucky when I was in Australia. There was a man called Bill Travail, who was a Dutch engineer, who was a bagpiper, lived in Australia. And he had learned basically himself how to make reeds, figured it out. And he taught me how to make reeds and other people like Mike Gilmore and all that kind of stuff and Steve Harris. And he set me off kind of basically in the proper run of learning to do it. And he was a fantastic teacher, very patient. And he got me some of my early tools and all that kind of stuff. Then I eventually came to the States. Eventually kind of work on getting some other tools and all that kind of stuff. And it's not kind of going quite right. And eventually I met a lovely old man called Sandy Hayne, who was the old pipe major of the Black Watch. And he'd emigrated a long time ago and was living in Cleveland. And he was a pretty good reed maker. So he was living there, and he kind of invited me in as many times as I could travel down, would teach me all different things. And his brother, Bob, is in Fife in Scotland, and he would make a lot of the machinery for a lot of the reed makers in Scotland as well. So I gained so much knowledge from these guys, and that was it. I was like hooked. I said, I got to do this. I moved from full-time teaching eventually into the reed making. Yeah. So
So, with reed making and as a professional piper, what do you find most rewarding?
as I've been a reed maker,
Well, either a reed maker or being a piper.
I mean, to be honest, right now, I'm very lucky that I'm working 2 doors down from here with Rodney McClellan, and it's been a fantastic. I moved down here in May, but it's been a fantastic experience with Roddy, just being able to talk about all different things about sound, and why can't we do this? Can we do this? How can we do this? What can happen? And then Roddy gives me his perspective from how a bagpipe works, or how a chanter works, or whatever. And we've come up with a new chanter which is lower pitched. It's got the old, to me, it's got the old thickness of tone, like the old chanters used to have. The Pibroch High G that is unwavering, doesn't move. The high, it's got a bit of a rah to it, and the pitch isn't too high. And over here, the sun's going to bring the pitch up anyway. So it's kind of, but with the reeds and amalgamating that and being able to put the whole thing together, it's been fantastic. And a couple of people who already have my chanter and all that kind of stuff, with a couple of bands, a couple of individuals, all that kind of stuff, they're loving it. And I am just enjoying hearing other people getting a really good sound, because I've always been very picky about my sound. And I kind of play a bigger sound if it's solos. I don't play a small sound anyway. But to me, it's like so fulfilling to hear somebody, it's not just that it's my reeds or my chanter or whatever, but just to see somebody kind of, when they come off and they kind of go, oh, everything was great. I really enjoyed that. I was like, and they're performing. I love that. So to me, that's very rewarding, to help somebody attain the sound they want to get.
So someone's going to ask, just because we played your clip here at the beginning of the segment, and we're going to play it at the end as you go out, and that's probably the bookend for as we do this thing moving forward. But your bagpipes, great sound. What are you playing?
So I'm
Soup
playing,
to nuts, what are you playing?
This is a wonderful set of drones made by Roddy for me, and they have the, I'm not sure you can see.
No, Roddy makes pipes out of a lot of material, but those are Blackwood?
Yeah, Blackwood with, I'm forgetting it momentarily, but Mapani wood, I think, mounts. And he's got the shape.
Which doesn't impact the sound.
No.
It's just
aesthetic. Has a more characteristic look, different to modern,
very shapely.
Old pipes. Yes. And the sheepskin bag, and I have, at the moment, I have a Kinnear bass reed. I have balanced tone tenor reeds, which are terrific. And I have my own Maca chanter. So that's Mac McClellan, A for Adrian. And obviously my own band reed chanter.
Melvin band chanter reed. So the same setup that the band's playing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a thick sound that we can have that's set up for North American conditions.
Yeah, there we go. So that leads me right into my question is, all the reed makers, all the chanter makers, all the prominent pipe makers, they're overseas, they're in the United Kingdom, and they do a great thing, but it's different here. Like we know that, and this is a very big spread of geography, and from sea to shining sea, we have different problems that we got to deal with.
Well, that's what I remember from Australia. Was in Australia we were playing hot conditions where it's like crazy for a bagpipe, and the problem is in Scotland it's not usually that well. Recently it was, but it's not usually that hot.
This is not that podcast,
right?
Okay.
So usually you're dealing with in Scotland the fact that the pitch is going down, and you're trying to get a brighter sound on a cool, dull day and all that kind of stuff.
Dank day.
Conditions are Here we don't have that much humidity. We don't have that much rainfall. We have a lot of sun. We have a lot of very quickly heat conditions, especially in the south and all that kind of stuff down here. And the heat can go up quickly. So I remember being in some days in Maxville where I was playing certain chanters from Scotland, great chanters for Scotland, but I'm having to make them work in North America, and all of a sudden my meter is telling me I'm at 494, which is insane for a number, especially if you're in
Which
Scotland.
bands hear that and they think we have to be at 494 because they are.
Well, I mean, Scottish bands are like 484. This
Okay.
is 94 where it's like insanely
Right.
dry, insanely hot, and it's just gone. Whew. So to me, the obvious thing to do was to try and make something purpose built for North America. It's not going to work in Scotland. I get that. If I had to build something for Scotland, I'll build something different for Scotland. But for here, we need to build something that's way lower because the sun is going to
So
take
how
us
low?
up.
How low?
So we're this chanter roughly now. I mean, I would say after 20 minutes, I'm about 479, bordering into 480. So then when the heat comes into play, playing outdoors in the summer and the heat, I'll probably it would be about 84, 85 at the most. Previously, I was like 6, 7, 8, 9.
Up
higher
into the
than that.
90s.
Yeah, and it just sounds like the only judges that could judge that would be dogs.
Sounds like a piccolo.
Yeah, the judges would be judging it, not us. I mean, the dogs would be judging it, you know. So the main thing was to bring the pitch down, get the thickness of tone, have a bagpipe that sounds like a real bagpipe, even though we're playing in bright, kind of sunny, dryish conditions.
And as you kind of did the research to design this chanter, I mean, using technology to do that research and kind of modify things and even modify your reed making with the different tools. And because I've seen your shop of what you got set up and all the different tools and stages. How many stages is it to make one of your reeds?
Oof.
I think Neil counted.
I would say it's about 14 stages, maybe.
Yeah.
But it happens over a bunch of days.
Sure.
Because you kind of have to do it in batches, and then sometimes you have to kind of wet the cane to do.
But those two pieces of cane and that piece of copper, they are touched many, many times.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
so I don't think you're selling them for enough money. I don't think any reed makers out. How you guys do that at scale and just stay afloat with your car payments? I don't know.
I have the utmost respect for every reed maker on this planet.
As do I.
I have to say, in the past, it's always been very competitive. When I grew up, it was like the reed makers weren't really meant to get on. We're meant to be competitive and all that kind of stuff. But to be honest, I've played other makers' reeds out there, and they're brilliant. Everybody has brilliant reeds. Everybody has some not so brilliant reeds. It's just life, you know. But I have to give everybody kudos in the reed making world for their patience, because it's not an easy career, you know.
No, not at all.
So,
and neither is bagpipe making.
No. No, you're right.
Going into it with the chanters, I mean, you come across a piece of Delrin that costs $40 or $50, and you see chanter makers selling them for $180. After seeing the 40 steps involved in making a chanter, and then hand turning holes, I understand it's every penny goes into that chanter and the design.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was doing just one of the multiple processes today on a whole bunch of chanters, like 16 of them today, and it's like, in the end, you see one bore at the chanter. It's not one go that gives you that bore. It's multiple ways of ensuring that it's completely dead.
And then dealing with the Delrin expanding and contracting and heat and everything else, double and triple checking your work.
Yeah.
So it goes out and everything sounds the way it should. So I got to ask, and I know we talked about that technology with the reed making and with the chanter making, and even going back to the days of the Vic Police with the synthetic bags with the clamps on the back and the synthetic drone reeds. How do you see the future of bagpipes, especially with the evolution of technology and new playing techniques? The bags staying inflated with a pump, things like that.
I mean, to be honest, I think especially in so I'll retrack a little bit. So the way I kind of looked at the old evolution of the chanters and all that kind of stuff, in my mind, and I could be wrong, it's just my opinion, is that way back before the chanter started to climb, I think the reed making was where it was. It wasn't very structured. It wasn't as much down to detail as modern day is nowadays. And back then they needed to bring the pitch up a little bit to get a brighter sound and all that kind of stuff, and the reeds weren't doing it back then. So they brought the chanters up in pitch.
Bit of a chase.
Right. So, but then all of a sudden the reed makers at some point started to figure out more detail, more change in the dimensions to get more of a brighter sound, or do this, and this will balance better at the higher pitch. But I think we kind of eventually came to a point with the chanters and the reeds where we start to have little kind of blips and little kind of squeals and on C and other different notes that happen because we're pushing the envelope just a bit too far. And
Meanwhile, did anyone talk to the bagpipe makers?
no,
I mean, you had some bagpipe makers that did it soup to nuts. I mean, you had Shepherd
yeah.
that did it.
But I think the great thing for me is I'm a reed maker working with a bagpipe maker, and we're getting to do all this in house.
Yeah, that
I think
collaboration.
if you could go back in time, it would be okay. The reed makers have to get the pitch up a little bit quicker, and rather than change the chanter so much, because I think we're going to start.
Were they talking to each other?
What's that?
Were they talking to each other?
Well, I don't think so back then. I think they were like separate houses. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think the way it is now, I think we're starting to travel back a little bit to retain a little bit of thickness and timbre of the sound, and trying to get especially a high A that's resonant. So I know for a fact that FM and the SFU in their heydays were always adamant on you get the top note first, the rest will come. But we need to have a sound that reverberates right and has a great thickness of sound, you know. And I think that's what we're starting to move back to, you know.
What advice would you give young pipers starting out today? And I know that you're in the band now, and you're actually now the pipe major of the Wake and District Pipe Band,
Well,
the overall
general-
band,
the
right?
general
The general
band,
band. I know
yes.
that gets confusing for people that we have a general band and a grade 3 and a grade 4. So Ken McKevney is the pipe major of the grade 3, Paul Anders the pipe major of the grade 4, and you are the pipe major of the band.
The overall. If we
Right,
play
the
gigs
overall
and
band.
different other things.
So
yeah.
a job that I did for many years, and it's been back and
Right.
forth with a couple people, but it's in your hands now. And I've seen you grab on with both hands, and thank you for that, for grabbing on with both hands. And one of the hands tends to have a hammer in his hand, and that's okay, because out of his mouth come nails, and I stand next to him, and some of those nails are shoved right at me, and I deserve it, because I have crossing noise from time to time, and I need to be told I need to fix that and put my foot down on the beat. So thank you for that, because even an old dog can learn new tricks, or an old cat, because I'm a cat guy, not a dog guy. You know that. So, what advice would you give our younger pipers? And we have a number of young pipers in the band, and just even young pipers. I know you go out and do a lot of workshops. You were down in Florida last month
Right.
with the band down there. What advice would you give young pipers about starting out today? You know, especially for those that want to do this as not necessarily a career, but they want to take this on as something very important to them.
I mean, to be honest, I mean, the main thing I would say to a lot of young pipers is obviously early on, I realized once you get rolling, you get up and running, you have to be very truthful or honest to yourself and say, what am I not good at? And you have to yourself
Little self-reflection.
pray on your own weakness and say, that's not going to be a weakness anymore. I'm going to retrain that, because there's no way anybody can learn a bagpipe. There's so much to learn. There's no way you can learn all right in the one first learning
No, and we're never
process.
done. We're never done learning.
You have to go back in. You have to kind of
Right.
retread things, rework things, and learn how to get all your execution, everything as well as you can. And to be honest, I mean, for instance, I always show this as an example to a lot of people. For instance, if you look at Stuart Little when he plays, I don't know why this is a thing with him. I'd love to chat one day to Stuart and ask. But from the knuckles forward, backwards, nothing moves.
Yeah.
And then if you just only use the fingers and you don't use your wrists for anything, especially top hand, you can do anything you want.
Little piston firing.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you start using your wrists, it's very slow. It's very cumbersome.
Like my right wrist that I have to get into the right position. That
exactly.
You broke me on Sunday,
Right.
Adrian.
Right. So if you can kind of teach this stuff to kind of be very much just the knuckles, the fast fingers only, and not slow wrist kind of stuff working, it makes a massive difference to your playing. So once you get up and running, retread everything, relearn everything. But I also say modern day, and this is just my perspective, try and get your own distinctive sound that is not going down the road that some pipers are going down nowadays, which is super high pitched and super thin. I have no problem if it's super high pitched, if it's got a thickness of sound. So if you go into any venue, say it's a bar that has a band that's playing some cover music for somebody, you know, whatever famous band. If you walk in and their basic sound is not very good, you're going to walk out. So as far as I'm concerned, with somebody that's playing in competitions and playing the bagpipe,
so like as a judge,
right? Yeah, I mean, it's just a natural thing. If it sounds great, you already have me far more won over then if it doesn't sound very good, you could be banging tune, but if there's no harmonics flying, it's hard to
So
like
playing
it.
is part of it, but the instrument is a
Yeah, really put your time in and the effort into learning how can I shave reeds to get them vibrate far better, because the material of a reed, I make it, any other reed maker makes it. It's never a finished product because every piece of cane has a slight different nuances. It's more uh, stiff, tight, or it's more rubbery where it has a bit more play. But every piece is different. So in the end, once you start playing it for a bit, if you're a good, really top end player, you're going to take out a little bit off here and there just to make it give you a lot more for a little bit less oomph. Uh, and that's what you need to learn, which unfortunately, you need to take some reeds and need to damage a couple and then figure out what you can do to get the best sound at your bagpipe.
yeah. And I've seen that even in Wake over the last 6 months with you being here, the little things you've had us do, spring the chanter stocks before we put the chanters in,
Because we don't
introducing
have,
moisture.
so if you play in Scotland, you can play for 5 minutes and your chanter stock's got moisture in it already. We
No,
don't
and
get
here
that.
we're using the chanter caps from Yori,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's still not enough.
Yeah. So the reed starts out in that motion, but then once you start playing, it's no longer in that cap. So then we need to get the moisture environment around the chanter reed to be where it is. Because for years, it was a couple of years, I was in charge of Midlothian, brilliant grade 2 band, great bunch of people in Chicago. We were a good band at the time in grade 2. And I remember tuning up on the Friday night before Chicago Highland Games, big event. So Friday night was sounding great. I mean, it's like, oh, we're going to kill it tomorrow. We get to the games the next day, and of course, I didn't realize it was in air conditioning on the Friday night. We get to the next day, it's like 94 degrees, and all of a sudden, like after 10 minutes, like where did our tone go? But eventually, I realized now in hindsight, the moisture content in each chanter stock was not the same in each bagpipe as it was in the Friday night.
Right.
So if I'd been smart enough at the time, which I wasn't, I would have.
Well, you'll learn the lessons
Right.
from it, and
Exactly.
and
Bagpipes always teach you a lesson until your grave.
fair
So
enough.
a lot of the thing is to try and get the moisture content the same in each bagpipe on the contest day as it is on the Friday or the Thursday before your band practice, because probably if you can attain that, you're going to probably find you don't have to move much in the competition.
Even competition or even rehearsal, I think about Wake with a grade 3 and a grade 4 and a grade 5, and even members that don't compete. Rehearsal on Monday, how many pieces of tape did we have to move with 17 pipers in the circle?
Right, because as soon as you introduce the moisture to control the amount, all of a sudden the within 5 minutes, 5-7 minutes, it starts to settle down.
Right.
And all of a sudden it starts to sound good and not shrill. You don't get shrill in Scotland, but you do get shrill in North America.
Damn sure do.
So that's the kind of thing where it's very much trying to work with the conditions you're given and trying to get the thick sound that is resembling the bagpipe that you can get in Scotland.
No, and even it's refreshing because we could spend more time focusing on actually rehearsing.
Right.
Versus tuning, because before the drummers and the tenor drummers would be doing their hair and nails respectively, and we weren't playing tunes together.
Right. I mean, the thing for me as a reed maker, I get a lot of people mention to me and say, "Well, this is sharp, and this is," and then I guess I can always do this as a knee jerk, but I kind of ask them what they've got for the bag, what they've got for the moisture, water traps, all that kind of stuff, and then I realize they're using all the moisture systems they can possibly get from Scotland, or that are generated because of Scottish needs. But they're like putting 3 of them in their bagpipe.
Myself included.
Right.
Guilty.
And then all of a sudden it's like you're not dealing with Scottish conditions.
And one thing at a time, unmitigating what we did or undoing it to get balance, balance with the rest of the band, or to get balance with your instrument.
So as soon as you treat it as a different thing away from Scotland and you treat it as a unique, different environment, it demands different things.
Kind of like how we treat bourbon different than we do Scotch, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, this Olde Raleigh bourbon, I love this stuff. When every now and again we come through for a wee batch release with the band, but some of the different things that they kind of promote with different kind of coffee, for instance, is coffee with
The coffee
bourbon.
bomb, yeah.
That was good. I tried that last week.
Where do you taste the barrel proof tomorrow?
Oh,
No, Saturday. I apologize, Saturday. So,
yeah, man.
so we're kind of running over, not overtime, but I mean, hey, it's our time. I just want to kind of close out with a couple of questions of first, just most memorable performance.
So I would say a couple actually. I would say the year we won, to be very honest, was probably not our best ever performance.
Do you think it was at the hotel the night before?
No. So the year we won, we were good, but we did have some small flaws in there. But we still had a very good sound, all that kind of stuff, and it was excellent. But the year before, we played an MSR. It was Clan McRae, Susan McLeod, McAllister's Dirk, I think that was the set. And I remember playing this and thinking, because usually when you're playing grade one bands, people outside are like, "That was a great performance," and you're like, well, inside it was just like, eh. So there's a difference between sitting outside and hearing it on the inside. And I met, so usually it's far worse on the inside, obviously, because you hear everything, right? Not everything goes outside. But I remember that performance, I was inside and I'm like, I heard nothing go awry. It was just like, excellent. Inside the circle, which was like, to be honest, it doesn't happen that many days in pipe bands. But I remember it was just fantastic. It was a great MSR, I thought. And I remember, maybe months later or whatever, I was talking to one of my gods of piping, Ian McClellan of the Strathclyde Police. And Ian always did everything very naturally, brilliant sound, thick sound, great tempo, amazing 6/8 march player, which is my favourite idiom. Anyway, he said that day he was in the audience and he said, that was how you should play an MSR. And I was like, you can't get much better kind of.
That's the judge.
Yeah. It was like, oh.
Okay, another hit question here. How has being a part of the bagpiping world shaped your life outside of music?
Oh, okay. So I would say, so no matter what's happened in my life, I mean, it's like anybody in life, you have your life you portray on Facebook. There's always a far harder life in your own life inside your own world. That's just life, But I think what bagpiping taught from me from an early age was I shape my own destiny. If I want to become a better player, I'm the one who's got to make it happen. I can't rely on somebody else to do it. I can get advice from people, but I'm the person who needs to make it happen. And I think from an early age on, bagpiping told me life is competitive in some shape or form. You need to get out. You need to do the hard yards. You need to make it happen. If you do that, even if it doesn't work, you at least can say, I did my best. But in most things in life, if you put the hard yards in, do the best you can to diligently get better, you're going to do better in life. So I guess that's what pipe bands and bagpiping really taught me, was to kind of never say die, and I'll always get better.
Let's go back to where we started with the young Adrian Melvin.
Yeah.
Picking up and having lessons with his father for the first 2 months and saying, I got to move on, I got to find another instructor. Is there anything you would go back today and tell your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Well, in that specific scenario, I would say have patience and cherish the time with your father. Obviously, and I was a hothead, and I understand that. I mean, I understand. How do I describe this? I'm not sure how to put this in words. I've never been somebody who's just very passive. I've always been a bit of a bull in a china shop. And that's just life.
No.
So that's just life. But I understand that's a good thing, and all that kind of stuff, you know. But like going back to myself, I would say just try and listen more, learn more, be open and accepting to ideas. Because the more you listen to other people, the less you will make the same mistakes. So I remember Terry Lee. I can't remember on it for right now. I can't remember what it was, but he said a couple of things in a workshop or something that I was at attending, and he said a couple of things, and I was like, very quickly, I was like, oh, and instantly I was like, well, I'm not going to drop into that pit. I'm not going to fall into that hole. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to learn from what he said he learned the hard way, and I'm going to try and move forward with not having to learn those hard lessons. So the more, to me, the more you can listen to Ian McClellan's, Terry Lee, Richard Parks, all the top players who say, don't do this, this, and this, and this, and this. Just do, go forward in this way. The more you can listen to these kind of top players, the better off, hopefully, you will be. And same with, for my younger self, it's very much like kind of learn from the people who've gone before you.
So for my older self, I like to look back in the rearview mirror a lot. I'm very excited to look forward with you. So to that, raise a glass.
And I have to say, thank you for creating everything in NC.
I like the cards we have. Raise a glass, tune your drones, and remember, whether it's bourbon or bagpipes, the best moments are always shared. Until next time.
Cheers. Sláinte.